All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our first event of the year. My name is Cristina Yiguren, and I'm the coordinator of International Graduate Services and Support Center. This center is dedicated to assisting you, our international graduates, as you seek employment and settle into Canadian life following graduation. International graduates from Mississauga, Toronto, Ottawa, and Sarnia have access to immigration guidance and services, career advice and services, networking events, and I recommend you to stay tuned because soon we will have more surprises tailored just for you. This webinar is exclusively for international graduates from Lambton College. In today's immigration session, we will discuss the following topics. First, avenues for obtaining permanent residence. Second, what to do if your application has been denied. And third, how French language proficiency can enhance immigration opportunities, followed by a Q&A section. This event is hosted by the Center in collaboration with Long Mongolji LLP law firm. Today we have two distinguished guests, Elizabeth and Mary. Elizabeth Long is a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She's an active advocate of immigration and refugees' rights in Canada. Elizabeth holds a Juris Doctor of Law degree from University of Toronto. She also holds a Master Law degree from Oswald Ho Law School, York University. Elizabeth has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, a prestigious list in which only approximately 65 lawyers in Canada belong. So that is pretty incredible and impressive. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for being with us today. We also have Mary McDonald, an associate lawyer at Long McGoldie LLP law firm. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from University of Toronto and a Juris Doctor from Oswald Ho Law School. She represents individual clients in a wide variety of applications, including express entry, provincial nominee programs, work permit, study permits, and temporary resident visas. So thank you once again for being here. I believe we can go with our first slide, please. All right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So there are so many reasons why we can take proud of being a Lambton alumni, as I'm proud of working here. First of all, the quality of education. We are very well known in the province and in the country. We've been ranked as one of Canadians' top research colleges, which is quite impressive. Also, a couple of weeks ago, I participated in Orientation Week, and I was surprised and pleased to see such an amazing group of people and diverse and inclusive environments, people from different countries all together. And you as an alumni had the opportunity to enrich yourself with this kind of experiences as well. I am also very proud because we can say that we accompany our graduates and students all the way, even before they land into Canada, because we have been ranked as in Ontario as the college with the highest study permit approval rate, which is quite impressive as well. And again, we're here to accompany you all the way, even after graduation with supportive service, such as the ones I presented to you that are offered by the center. So I recommend you to take advantage of all these services. So now let's get started. And I want to welcome our distinguished guests of honor, Elizabeth and Mary. Now the floor is all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's great to be here with you guys. So just some housekeeping. First of all, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. You can see that button on the bottom of your screen and put your questions there. We will try to answer as many questions as we have at the end of the presentation, okay? Also, this session is recorded, and we will be sending a copy of the recordings to everyone in a few days afterwards, after I've had a chance to edit, to everyone who has registered for this. And we will also be sending out the slides to you guys as well. Now, everyone who has registered for this, we will be putting you on to a newsletter list. You can, if you don't like it, you can certainly unsubscribe. But we do find that a lot of people want to be on that list because whatever we tell you today is true today, but the immigration laws change so much that probably will be changing, a few weeks, sometimes a few days afterwards as well. And the only way we're able to keep you updated on some important pieces of news is through our newsletter. And we are now also very active on social media as well, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, what else? Facebook. So if you wanted to follow us on that, we also have more news on that as well. All right, let's get started. So first thing that we wanted to touch upon is you guys may have your postgrad work permits right now, but it's very important that you don't get out of status. So Mary's going to talk about what you need to keep in mind when you're extending your status.
Mm-hmm. So it's really important to make sure that your status is valid while you're here in Canada. So the first thing you want to do is look at the permit that you have right now. If maybe you're still on a study permit, or maybe it is your postgrad work permit, and you need to note the expiry date. So write it down on your calendar, put it in your phone, and keep a close eye on the expiry date of your current permit. And if it's going to expire, make sure that you are going to apply for an extension before that expiry date. So that brings me to the key thing to understand, which is implied status. So when you submit an extension application, as long as you submit it properly and before the expiry date that's listed on your permit, you have what's called implied or maintained status while you're waiting for a decision on that application. So as long as you apply for the extension before the expiry date, you can continue working in Canada or studying if that applies to you, while you're waiting for IRCC to actually process that extension or make a decision on your application. One thing to note about implied status is it does require you to be in Canada while you're waiting for a decision. So if you leave Canada, your implied status will end. And another thing that's important to note is restoration. So let's say you wake up one day and you realize, oops, I missed the expiry date on my permit. Well, you might still be in what's called the restoration period. So from the expiry date on your permit, you have 90 days to apply to restore your status. So if you've lost your status, you can get your status back by applying for that restoration application. And it's really important to keep in mind that the deadlines on restoration are very, very strict. So you have 90 days from when you lose your status, meaning that's the expiry date on your permit, or if you applied for an extension and it was refused, then it's 90 days from the date of the decision on the refusal.
All right, so most of you probably already have your postgrad work permits, but you only get one postgrad work permit in your life. And the government, the minister, they had been, having some of these temporary policies that allowed some students to extend the postgrad work permits. The minister did announce in December that they're no longer going to be doing this. And so it's back to the regular rule that you only get your one postgrad work permit in your life. Okay, so what do you do if you need to extend your work permit beyond the length of time of your postgrad work permit? For most of you, your employer may need to do a LMIA, labor market impact assessment. So the normal LMIAs is an application where the employer first has to advertise and try to recruit Canadians for the job. And if they cannot find Canadians for the job, then they can apply for an LMIA, and they can try to have the officer assess it and approve the LMIA, showing that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. Okay, it's only after you get the LMIA that you can apply for the work permit. Now, some things to note for the LMIA is that the salary needs to meet at least the median wage for your occupation for the normal LMIAs. Okay, a lot of times the employers are very reluctant to do the LMIA because it's a lot of work for them, first of all. And second of all, sometimes if the work is not that specialized or it's not that difficult to find Canadians to do the job, even if they do it, the officers may reject the application. There is, however, another kind of LMIA called the Global Talent Stream that is there for a lot of STEM workers. And so if you do have an occupation that falls within a list of the global talent stream, your employer does not have to advertise. They instead provide a labor market benefit plan, and then we can submit their application. The application is assessed in normally around 2 weeks processing time. So it's a much faster and easier way for the employers to get the LMIA, but it has to be under one of those occupations. And it really, sometimes the global talent stream, the salaries may be even higher than the median wage as well. Some of you may qualify and may be invited to apply for different permanent residence applications like the express entry. So if you have been invited to apply and you submitted your application for express entry, you can apply for an open bridging work permit to allow you to continue to stay in Canada and work in Canada. This is the place for certain kinds of PNPs as well, the PNPs that are not employer specific. They're also in place for things like the caregiver program, etc. So the bridging is to give you a bridge to stay in Canada while waiting for the permanent residence, but you would have had to have been invited to apply for the permanent residence first, or received, for example, a provincial nomination beforehand, okay? Provincial nominee permit, work permit, where you have applied for an employer-specific program, and Mary's going to go into the OIMP employer-specific programs. Those kind of work permits, if you have the provincial nomination, you can apply for the work permit, but they are employer-specific. You have to only work for that specific employer and no one else. Francophone work permit. Now, we are going to be talking about some of the advantages for Francophones. And one of the big advantages to being able to speak French is if you get a job outside of Quebec, and now the language requirements are lower at the CLB 5 level. And also, it doesn't actually matter. It used to be that you have to be high skilled. Now it could be any level of skill. You can also get a work permit as long as your job is outside of Quebec. You don't have to speak. The job doesn't have to require you to speak. You just need to be able to have a certain level in French as well. Okay. Free trade agreement professionals. This is a very good category for those people who belong to certain free trade agreement countries. And a lot of Latin American countries are part of this. In Mexico, we have 2 fantastic free trade agreements. Peru, Colombia, Panama, Chile. And then we also have Australia, Japan, we have UK, European Union, Japan, Malaysia. I mean, there's all sorts of different free trade agreements. Not all free trade agreements are equal. Some of them, it's easier to get work permits than others. But essentially, if you're a national of one of the free trade agreement countries, you don't need an LMIA. If your job offer falls within the list of professionals where you're entitled to get a work permit if you have a job offer in that profession. So a lot of, for example, engineers and management consultants and technicians and technologists, and the list goes on. It really depends on the free trade agreement. Oh, and of course, Americans are also included in there as well, okay? Finally, for young people, it depends on which country you're from and how old you are. But for a lot of young people from under the age of 30 or 35, if you belong to one of the countries that is part of the international experience class, that category, you can get either an open work permit called the working holiday work permit, or a young professionals work permit, where if you have a job offer in Canada, you can also get a work permit to work there. Now, these are limited. They're usually for 1 or 2 years, and you can't get another work permit under the same category normally, but they are available for those people who are a little bit younger and are nationals of certain countries. All right, let's talk about permanent residence. Let's start with Mary.
Okay, so as you start looking at different PR routes, you'll find that many of them are going to require you to have high-skilled work experience. So it's very important to know whether a job that you take is high or low skilled so that you know if it's going to qualify you for PR and keep your options open. So what's the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled work? So IRCC has categorized all the different jobs into different national occupation codes called NOC codes. The NOC codes are divided into 6 tiers, and tier 0, 1, 2, and 3 are considered high skilled, whereas tier 4 and 5 are considered low skilled. So in 2022, this whole system changed, and some jobs that were considered low skilled are now high skilled, like truck drivers, personal support workers, where some that were considered high skilled are now considered low skilled. It's really, really important to confirm that you're going to qualify for PR with the work experience that you're getting. So just make sure that your position is considered high skilled, and don't just rely on what your friends have done or what you read online, because this system does change. And it's really important to make sure that you're going to qualify for PR with your work experience.
You know, as Mary has said, it's really important to know what you need to do in order to get permanent residence. We're going to go through a few routes for permanent residence right now. And, you know, there are different kinds that are beyond this. And, you know, for example, like, and also with the work permits, there are many different kinds of work permits as well that you can get, more than what I just touched upon. Those are some of the common ones that we may be able to use for students. But it's not just something that you can assume that you can extend your work permit when your work permit expires. And you can't just assume anymore that you can get, you know, permanent residence if you work in Canada. It's very, very important to have a plan to understand what are the possibilities out there. And of course, the laws also do change as well. So you do need to be able to have a plan to and take into considerations different kind of contingencies and be able to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C. Okay. So the first kind of permanent residence that I wanted to talk to you about, most of you probably have already heard about. It's called the express entry. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about express entry. So I just wanted to first of all give you a broad overview, and then we'll go into the details. Express entry is one of the most popular ways to get permanent residence. It's not the only way, okay? And we'll be talking about other things, but here's how express entry works. First of all, in order to start the process, you have to create an online profile, and you can create an online profile if you qualify under one of 3 categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, and the Federal Skilled Trades class. Once you create a profile, you can enter the express entry pool. But it's very important to note that just because you've entered into the pool does not mean that you have applied for permanent residence. Okay, immigration does not consider that someone who has just created an online profile has applied. You haven't applied yet. You have indicated to the government that you could qualify for permanent residence and you're interested in applying. And you can go into the pool, but just because you're in the pool, it doesn't mean much. If you don't get invited to apply, you can stay in the pool for a year and then your profile will expire. Okay, so now once you get into the pool, you will have a series of points that is based on your background called the CRS score. And it's based on your background, and also if you have provincial nomination that's related to express entry. There are different kinds of provincial nominations. Some of them are not express entry based, and some of them are express entry based. Only the express entry based provincial nominations will give you 600 additional points. Also, now the government also looks at category based draws, which we will touch upon later. So every couple of weeks or so, it does vary, but usually around every couple of weeks, the government will have a draw where they invite people to apply. And it's only after you get the invitation to apply that you can actually submit your application and you can actually apply for permanent residence. Okay, so how do they select invitations to apply? It's based on your comprehensive ranking system, the CRS points, and also the category-based draws. Now, before we talk about draws, I just want to quickly touch upon how you can actually enter the pool and qualify, okay? So the first category, many of you likely already qualify for. In order to qualify under the federal skilled worker class, you have to have at least 1 year of high skilled work experience in one occupation that is continuous and full-time, okay? This work experience does not have to be in Canada. It could be overseas. It could be self-employed. It could be while you're studying, okay? It's not the same as the Canadian experience class. We have many people who can qualify and go through express entry, even if they have never come to Canada before, okay? Beyond that, you need to have a certain level in language, and then we take a look at your overall background points to meet the minimum federal skilled worker score of 67. This is not the CRS score for express entry. This is a federal skilled worker score. You also need to have a certain amount of financial savings as well. The second class is called the Canadian Experience class. Now, the work experience required for this is very different from the federal skilled worker class. The work experience that you require for this is 1 year of high skilled work experience within the last 3 years of application, okay? And it has to be when you're in Canada, you're employed with a Canadian employer, you have to be employed, okay? So not self-employed. It also has to be when you are not a full-time student. It does not have to be continuous. It does not have to be in one occupation, okay? So I just wanted to touch upon the requirement for being not self-employed. Not self-employed means you don't own or control a significant part of the company that you're working for. So for example, you can't just set up your own company and hire yourself, okay? It also does not include work experience, for example, that let's say you go to an employer and the employer says, oh, okay, why don't you just, I don't want to bother my accountant. Why don't you just invoice me? I'll pay you by the hour, or I'll pay you cash, okay? That doesn't work. You need to get a T4 at the end of the year, or on your pay stubs. You should also see that there is a CPP-EI income tax deductions, okay? That's what being an employee, this is the documentation the officers are looking for. The skilled trades, most people aren't, this is not a very popular one. It's mostly for people in the trades, and it requires either LMIA or provincial certification, okay? Okay, so let's say you've gotten into the pool. How do you get out? So here are some of the points that, this is the points that make up the comprehensive ranking system. The first one is age. Now, here's the thing. When you get to your 30th birthday with express entry, your birthdays no longer become happy birthdays. Okay. In your 30s, every year that you turn older, you get -5 points, -6 points. In your 40s, it gets even worse, -10, -11. By the time you get to your 45th birthday, the good news is you don't have to worry about age anymore. The bad news is, or getting older anymore, the bad news is that you get 0 on your age points compared to someone in their 20s who has 110, 100 points. That can be very significant. There's not a lot you can do about age except to apply earlier rather than later. Education, if you have 2 programs under your belt, that really makes your points jump. So if one of the programs is at least a 3-year program, and then you have another post-secondary program, then you do have a significant increase in your points. Language, right now the points are extraordinarily high, in around the 500s range. And so the language points likely are, in order to have a good chance, especially without work experience or without the category-based draws, you're looking at least the CLB 9 level, which in IELTS is 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening, or the CELPIP is 9 in everything. Relevant Canadian work experience is very significant, and this is the kind of work experience that is the same as what I described in the Canadian experience class. The kind of work experience that you need when to have when you are working for a Canadian employer, you're not self-employed, and it's high skilled, and you don't get this work experience counted if you were working while you are a full-time student. Foreign work experience, that is work experience, high-skilled work experience that you have gained outside of Canada. That could count. Spouse's education, language, Canadian work experience. If your spouse is a super spouse and has a lot of these qualities, then they could add to your points. If not, they may take away a little bit of the points. Provincial nominee programs, Mary is going to talk about that. So provincial nominee programs are programs that the federal government has made agreements with each province, and each province has created provincial nominee programs for their province. So the province will select the people that they want to get permanent residence, and then the federal government will go through things like security checks and medical checks, and then eventually, they should approve it if those are passed. Okay, so it's a collaboration between the province and the federal government. There are different kinds of provincial nominee programs. Not every provincial nomination will give you 600 points for express entry. Only the express entry-based provincial nominee programs will give you 600 points. Mary will go through what's available in Ontario, but every province will have their own provincial nominee programs. If you've previously studied in Canada, so if you did a 1 or 2 year program in Lambton College, you can get 15 points. And arranged employment. Now, these, a lot of people think, oh, I have a job offer, I have a work permit, I have arranged employment points, right? Not necessarily. So if you have a post-grad work permit, this does not qualify you for arranged employment. To qualify for arranged employment, you have to have an employer-specific work permit or an alumni A, and that then will help you get arranged employment. Okay. Siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, those can give you a few points. Fluency in French, again, French pops up again as to, giving you a significant advantage if you understand French with regard to express entry. And trade certifications. This is not very many people have this. This is for the construction trades and cooks and chefs. Okay. All right. So one last thing about express entry. And this is one of the main reasons why the points have become so high, is because the government started these new category-based draws in the summer. Okay. And so people often describe express entry draws like skimming the cream. So basically, the government will have a certain number of people that they want to invite, and they will have the top people who have the top scores to invite those people to apply. What happened in the summer of last year is the government started these new category-based draws where, again, French. If you know French, okay, you have a certain level in French, you can qualify, or if you have 6 months of work experience in the last 3 years in certain occupations, what they will do is they will have specific draws for each category where, let's say they invited, 1,000 people who are French, who are francophones. They have the French proficiency. Those draws will be lower, okay? And so, because there's only so many people who speak French, and let's say they have 1,000, let's say you only have 5,000 people in the pool, then the points will be, much lower. So I think at some point French went down to 300 something for French selections. However, the general based draws where everybody is in the pool, that has become much higher because the government doesn't invite that many people anymore. They might have one general draw and then a category based draw every month, whereas before they used to have 2 general draws every month. So the inventory for the general draws has been building, and the cream has gotten thicker and thicker. So that's one of the reasons why express entry right now for the general draws, the points are very high. Would it work for you? It will really depend on your circumstances. And we're going to talk a little bit about, what to think about, but really it depends on the planning for your situation. And a lot of times we are looking at other avenues as well. Last year we had 900,000 international students come into the country and 700,000 workers, international workers as well. This year for express entry, there's only 110,000 people. So, that's a very small percentage of people who can actually get permanent residence through express entry. However, there are also 110 or 100, around 110,000 provincial nominations that are going to be issued. So Mary is going to talk about how you might qualify under the Ontario provincial nominee programs.
Right. So as Elizabeth was mentioning, there are other ways to get points in express entry through the provincial nomination programs. These are also called the P&Ps, and Ontario's provincial nominee program is called the OINP. The OINP has several different kinds of streams, and some of them are linked to express entry. So if you receive a nomination from Ontario through these streams, it can add 600 extra points to your express entry score, which basically ensures that you're going to get an invitation to apply for PR through express entry. So how do these express entry streams work? So in Ontario, you can't just go and directly apply to the express entry OINP streams. First, you actually have to be in the express entry pool, and then you wait to receive a notification of interest from Ontario. Then, and only if Ontario is interested in you, they'll send you a notification of interest, and you can get those 600 extra points on your CRS score. So who are they going to be giving out these notifications of interest to? There are 3 categories that they've identified. The first one is the human capital stream. So in order to receive a notification of interest in this stream, you need to be in the express entry pool. You need to have a bachelor's degree. The bachelor's degree doesn't have to be from Canada, it can be from overseas. And Ontario has specified certain candidates that they're going to be interested in for this stream. So for example, they have prioritized people in tech. They sometimes specify other types of applicants they're going to invite, like people with job offers or people with certain work experience. The next stream is the French speaking stream. So in order to qualify for this, you need to be in the express entry pool. You need to have a bachelor's degree and you need to have a high level of French, which would be a CLB 7 and a 6 in English. If you're in the pool with those qualifications, then you could receive a notification of interest from Ontario for this stream. And then the third one targets people in the skilled trades. So if you're in the express entry pool and you have at least 1 year of work experience in Ontario within the last 2 years in one of the trades that Ontario has specified, you could receive a notification of interest. This stream doesn't require a bachelor's degree as long as you have a work permit and you've been working for 1 year in a skilled trade that Ontario has listed, you could receive a nomination or a notification of interest through this stream. So aside from those express entry streams, there's also several streams that are underneath the OINP expression of interest. So that's EOI, expression of interest streams. These streams have different requirements and they also have a different application process. So if you qualify for one of these programs, you have to register your expression of interest in the OINP pool for the particular program that you qualify for. Once you're in the pool, you're waiting for Ontario to do a draw for your program and give you a notification of interest. Ontario doesn't announce when they're going to do their draws, so it's best to get in the pool as soon as you qualify for one of these streams because you never know when Ontario will do another draw and you could get an invitation. If you get selected, they issue you that notification of interest and then you apply to get your nomination. And once your nomination is processed, you can then apply for PR through the federal government. So these streams have different points and different requirements than express entry. Some streams require you to have a job offer, which I'll get into in a moment. And other streams like the PhD or master's streams don't require job offers, but you have to have graduated with a PhD or a master's in Ontario in the last 2 years to qualify. So there are also the employer-based streams. So I think it's on the next slide. We get into it a little bit. Yeah, okay. So for these streams, you as the applicant have to meet certain requirements, and you also need a job offer from an employer that meets certain requirements. So for all of these streams, the business that's supporting your application has to have been in business in Ontario for 3 years. If they're inside of the GTA, they have to show that their gross income in the last fiscal year was 1 million, and that they have 5 full-time Canadian or PR employees. And if they're outside of the GTA, they have to have 500,000 in income in the last fiscal year and have 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. The job offer itself has to be full-time and permanent means no end date on your contract. So let's talk about the individual requirements under the 3 different streams. So the first one is the international student stream. So in order to qualify for this stream, you need a job offer that meets those requirements listed above. And you need to have completed your program of study in Ontario within the last 2 years. So you need to have also completed an eligible program. That means you've either done a 2-year degree or diploma program in Ontario, or as of January 2nd of this year, OINP did change the rules a little bit, and they've opened it so that you can also have an eligible credential if you've done a 1-year college program that grants an Ontario College graduate certificate. So aside from having that qualifying education within the last 2 years, you also need a high-skilled job offer that's full-time, and you need to be paid at least the low wage rate for your occupation according to your location of employment. The next stream is called the skilled worker stream. So for this stream, you need to have a job offer that meets the requirements, and you also need to have at least 2 years of work experience within the last 5 years in the same occupation as your job offer. That work experience doesn't have to have been in Canada. It doesn't have to even have been in Ontario. It just has to be able to show that you have 2 years of experience in the last 5 years. It has to have been high skilled, and the salary offered has to be the median wage for your region. This program doesn't have any specific education requirements though. And then the final one is the in-demand jobs. So in the OIMP has a list of occupations that qualify for this program. So it's not just every occupation, it's a very specific list. But this program is one of the only ones that includes low-skilled job offers and positions. So if you, or for example, your spouse is in a low-skilled position, you could potentially look at this program. In order to qualify, you need a job offer and you need at least 9 months of experience in Ontario in that same occupation, but it can be with different employers. And you also need to be offered the median wage level for the occupation in your location. Okay, so another option for PR, so outside of these P&Ps, outside of Express Entry, is the caregiver stream. So this is a program that the government announced, which allows you to apply for PR if you can show that you've cared for either children or an elderly or special needs person in their home. So it's really important to understand this doesn't qualify if you are hired to work at an institution or a hospital. It has to be in an individual's home. If you work for 12 months and you have language scores above CLB 5, then you can submit an application through this stream. The important thing to note about this stream is that the government only accepts a limited number of these applications each year. And once they reach their limit, the pool closes until the next year. So the program for caring for children is extremely competitive and closes within a few minutes of opening every year, whereas the program for caring for elderly people often takes a little bit longer to fill up, which makes it a little bit easier to apply through. So if you're planning on applying through this stream, you want to be strategic about which one you're applying to and when. This program is also a really good option to think about if your spouse has that education credential and can work here, is working here in Canada. They could also look at working as a caregiver and qualifying through this stream.
All right. So just wanted to also, because that's one of the topics that we were asked to talk about is the French advantage. And we've talked a lot about this throughout, but just wanted to summarize. If you can speak French, you are one lucky person because there are a myriad of options for French speakers. First of all, the Francophone work permit. You can get your work permit if you have a job offer anywhere outside of Quebec, as long as you can meet the certain level of French level. You have significant points for express entry, even with the general draws. And with the French draws, you will have special draws for Francophones as well. There are special French-speaking draws for OIMP, where you can get 600 more points. And with employer-based streams, you can also get higher points if you have a second language for French as well. So if you can understand French, you had better be able to get your PR. Come to us and we'll figure out a way for you. All right. Now, we've talked a lot about different programs and maybe your mind is spinning a little bit about, what to do. Here's some practical pieces of advice that we'd like to leave you with.
Okay, so the first one is have a plan as to what you need to do to get to your immigration goals. Not only a short-term plan, but a long-term plan. And make sure that you're on the right track right now.
Yeah, so, I'm going to be providing you with our contact information. That's your first step, is to sit down with a good immigration lawyer and figure out what you need to do. Okay, we get a lot of questions on Q&A and say, hey, what should I do? What should I do? And the problem is that we need to know all of your circumstances. Normally, we sit down with you for at least a half an hour to understand what it is that you have in your background that can, qualify you for different programs, and also what you want to do as well, and what's important to you. Once we have that, once you have a plan, then you can get to your immigration goals. And the second step is, after you have the plan, now you have to action it. And that's often much easier said than done. There's a lot of things that, you may not have wanted to do. For example, you have to study for those exams, for those language exams. A lot of the times, those language exams, they test a person's ability to do the exams and not necessarily their ability in that. So even if your first and only language is English, for example, you still need to study, understand what they're looking for in these exams. We have many people whose first and only language is English who can't do well on these exams because they're not used to these exams. Make sure sometimes the programs that you do may make a difference. The length of the program, for example, will make a difference as to your work permit. The type of program sometimes makes a difference with OIMP. Where you study makes a difference. And so even if you have completed a program, it may be that you may need to do another program in order to help your chances as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing you need to do is make sure that you stay in status and you don't misrepresent. So keep a close eye on those expiry dates. And whenever you're making an application, make sure you tell the truth to immigration. Lying or even just providing incorrect information by mistake on an application can result in a 5-year ban from Canada.
And finally, if your application is rejected, don't try to fix it yourself. Contact a good lawyer right away, not a consultant. Consultants cannot go to court. They don't know what to do in those kinds of circumstances. Hopefully you would have started working with a lawyer from the beginning, so you don't need to get into the trouble. But if you do, don't try to fix it yourself. There are very strict rules for going to the federal court. If you wanted to file what's called a judicial review for the court to review the application, the period is only 15 days if the decision is made in Canada. You only have 15 days to file it, okay? Sometimes you can call the call center, for example, and the person on the other line, if you eventually get through, may be very nice, and they said, oh, yeah, we'll just put a note on your file, or this is what you do, just send a note to immigration and they can fix it, okay? More often than not, what happens is it doesn't get fixed because you may not know what to say, and the officer, if you just the call center just puts a note in, the officers may not do anything about it. And then if that happens and you come to me and say, hey, Elizabeth, can you fix it now? It may be a little bit too late for me to file the reconsideration because you only get one chance to file a reconsideration. And if the call center put a note in, or if you wrote something yourself, that is considered your one chance to apply for reconsideration, okay? So even if I wanted to put proper legal submissions on that, they may not even look at what I say if you've already submitted a reconsideration. Finally, there are a lot of timeline issues. Restoration period, 90 days, right? Or you may be out of status if you reapply. If you wanted to sometimes apply for different kinds of work permits, like the postgrad work permit, you may be out of time to apply for that if you go beyond a certain date, okay? So make sure that if an application is rejected, you contact a lawyer right away. All right, so this is the information. If you wanted to come for a consultation, email us probably would be the best way. Tell us you're coming from Lambton College, and we do give you a discount if you're coming from Lambton College on the consultation. It's only $100, and we can meet you by Zoom. We schedule a time, we meet you by Zoom and go through your plan. All right, let's go. Holy cow, we have 43 questions. Okay, well, I don't know if we can get through 43 questions, but let's see what we can do here. All right.
So the first one we've got is, which province aside from Ontario would you recommend trying to apply for under PNPs with a financial planning and wealth management background?
These PNPs, and there are other programs as well. We didn't get a chance to go through everything. There's RNEP programs, AIP programs, etc. It really depends on where you have a job. Okay, so if you can get a job in another province, maybe it might be easier to apply through that province. But if your job is in Ontario, that's where you have it. That may be the point. So I wouldn't be able to tell you specifically right now what it is. Come for a consultation and we can go through your options.
Okay. Please share insights about the OIMP update on January 2nd, 2024.
I think you already did that, Mary. That was when before they were much more strict on the international student stream if you had a 1-year certificate. Now, if you have a 1-year Ontario graduate certificate, you will qualify for the international student stream.
Okay, I have a CRS score of 49. I'm in Ontario and work in STEM. Should I wait for a STEM draw as I only have 1 year work permit left, or is it a better option to look for the PMPs?
Very good questions. We can't really tell you unless you come for a consultation. We sit down with you and give you a plan.
Yeah. Okay, which province should I move to get PNP or PR? I'm in Ontario right now.
Again, something that we need to sit down with you and do a consultation.
Yeah, a few of these, the ones that are really specific, I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer
Okay,
here. Maybe I'm going to look for some general questions.
Yeah.
What are options for those who have low CRS scores in terms of age?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, we really do have to look at that. Ontario OIMP programs, for example, don't really look at age. The age is not a factor when you're looking at the Ontario programs, which I really love. And sometimes you can compensate for that loss of the age points through other things like work experience. We can also look at LMIAs. We can also look at entrepreneur work permits if you wanted to start your own business, startup visas if you want to start your own business. There's a whole host of different options. It would take us days to go through all of the different options, but do come. It is an issue on the surface with regard to express entry, but there are other options as well.
Okay. Can you create a profile before you accumulate the 1 year of experience?
So you may not be able to even get into the pool if you don't qualify under one of the 3 categories. So you need at least 1 year of work experience, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in Canadian work experience. You may qualify under the federal skilled worker class, but that's for the express entry. Now, for the Ontario program, for the international student stream, you do not need to have any work experience to qualify. So you could get into the international student stream without any work experience.
Great. Okay. Let's see. What is the best way to increase your score in express entry?
Oh, that's a good question, and there's often different kinds of ways. Sometimes you might want to really study for those language points. 0.5 can sometimes be the difference in 90 points. 0.5 on one skill can be the difference between in 90 points, you know? Sometimes you might want to look at your work experience, and not just Canadian work experience, but even foreign work experience can give you significant points. You can get 50 points for foreign work experience. Sometimes, I know a lot of people don't want to leave Canada, but sometimes it might be worth it to, once you have that Canadian work experience and your work permit is going to expire, if you can do 1 year of work experience, you know, back in your home country and do that for 1 year, your points would rise significantly. We can look at different things like free trade work permit. That will give you arranged employment points, or LMIAs will give you arranged employment points. We can look at OIMP, and we can look at all sorts of other sorts of situations, studying another program, etc.
Okay, let's see.
I see here a question about TEF exam in another country. I think so you can do TEF in any country. I think there's another one called TCF as well that you can also do. These exams, as long as it's by the organizations that properly administer it, you can certainly do that outside of the country.
Great. Is co-op experience that's part of a course counted under express entry work?
So co-op experience for Canadian work experience that gives you the CRS points likely will not count because you get that when you're a full-time student. So that work experience you can only get when you're not a full-time student.
Okay.
I see. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
How about we take turns to ask
Sure.
Mary, there's a question. How can you apply for the human capital stream?
Right. So applying for the human capital stream, you can't apply for it directly. You need to be in the express entry pool. So you have to qualify for the express entry pool. And then if you're in there and you are maybe working in one of the jobs that they've specified or you have the experience they want, then Ontario could give you a notification of interest. So there's no way to directly apply. Sometimes we talk about it like it's the dating app, if you're familiar with it. It's called Bumble, where like the women will choose if they want to match with a man. And it's kind of like Ontario is the woman in that situation. And they see everybody who's available in express entry. And only if they're interested, they give you that notification. You can't contact them directly and say, I want to be in the human capital stream. You have to wait for them to contact you. As long as you're in the express entry pool, you're automatically being considered under the human capital stream. Okay. And let's see, a question for you.
I have another question for you, Mary. Is it possible to apply for permanent residence through different streams? For example, CEC and foreign skilled worker at the same time?
Right. So under express entry, if you're in the pool and you qualify under more than one stream, you're automatically being considered under CEC if you have the Canadian work, and you can be also qualifying for federal skilled worker at the same time. So putting yourself into the pool, it's automatically going to consider whether you qualify for both of those streams, and then you'll be able to potentially get an invite through either one. Okay.
So this other person said, if they obtain their work permit only until July of this year because the passport expired on that date, what can they do? Can they extend that if they still have a postgrad? I'm guessing they are entitled to a postgrad work permit of 3 years, for example, and they only get part of that. What can they do in that situation?
Right. So in that situation, the best thing to do is to renew your passport, ideally for as long as possible. And then once you have a new passport, you can contact IRCC and ask them to issue you the remaining length of your postgrad work permit. As long as on your postgrad work permit it says issued to passport expiry, then you're going to be able to get the extra time that you are allotted for your postgrad work permit.
Yeah, you do need to submit a new work permit application to extend it. This is one of the few times that you can actually extend your work permit for the postgrad work permit.
Okay, I have one here. How much is median wage?
Good question. It's on the website. So if you search the job bank for Canada, you'll come up to a site where they can tell you what the median job is, a wage for the occupation and the location that you're in. So you need to know what your knock code is. You plug that in, you look at the occupation and you look at and that's updated every few months. So that can change.
Great. Okay.
So for the OIMP express entry streams, do they need to have high CRS points to get nominated?
Not necessarily. The OIMP express entry streams will essentially do a draw and they just say what CRS scores they're interested in. A lot of the time they're interested in people with lower CRS scores. Sometimes they still keep a bit of a higher range, but generally speaking, it's below, especially the current general draw thresholds.
Yeah. And it really depends on what it is. For example, the human capital streams, those scores tend to be much higher, like the tech draws and etc. Those tend to be much higher than, for example, the skilled trades stream. Those skilled trades stream, because they're looking at who is likely to get invited. And skilled trades, the tradespeople oftentimes, their English may not be as great and their education may not be as great, but they really want people in those occupations. So those scores may be much lower, maybe in the 300s, or sometimes even 200. Sometimes they don't even have a level for that. So it depends on which category it is.
Okay, I'm just looking for more general questions.
They said again, for OIMP in the category of skilled worker, the 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the occupation, does it have to be in Canada?
So let me double check.
So this is for the OIMP, for the skilled worker stream, the 2 years of work experience you said that they have to have. They're
Yeah.
wondering, does that have to be in Canada or not?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
So you can have work experience that's outside of Canada within the last 5 years, as long as it's in the same NOC. And again, keep in mind, it has to be within the last 5 years. So up until when you apply, you need those 2 years, but yeah, it can be outside of Canada.
They're wondering for the international student stream,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to have 1 year of work experience. And they're wondering, is that category based? Is that occupation, I guess?
Right. So no. So the international student stream, they do specific draws. So for example, they haven't done a general draw in a long time. So they have been specifying categories, but they also do general draws. Although they haven't done one since January of last year. So we're hoping that they'll do a general draw soon.
Yeah. So you can get into the pool without without being in a specific occupation, but they may or may not invite you to apply based on your occupation.
Mm-hmm. Can you apply to various provincial PNPs at the same time?
Apply to provincials PNPs. Okay, so here's the thing, okay? The provinces very, very jealously guard their nominations. They're only allowed to have a certain limit for the quotas. And so they want to make sure that whoever they are nominating has the intention to live in the province. So if you apply to 2 different provinces, say you apply to Ontario, you're applying to BC, you have stated that you intend to live in 2 provinces. So which one are you lying about? Okay, that's going to be a big issue. So no, you cannot apply to 2 different provinces. In fact, if you apply for a provincial nominee program in one province and then you move out of that province, your application will likely be denied at the federal level while you're waiting for the permanent residence. So if you want to apply under the provincial nominee program, you need to intend to stay there and stay in that province until a decision is made on your permanent residence. Once that decision is made on your provincial nominee, once that decision is made on your permanent residence, you have your permanent residence, then you are able to live elsewhere in Canada because your intentions can change afterwards and you have the constitutional right to live anywhere you like as a permanent resident. But until you get that permanent residence issued by the federal government, it's not even after you get your provincial nomination, it's issued by the federal government, you need to stay in that province where you've applied.
Can companies help you get PR by sponsoring you either with Express Entry or PNP programs?
So sponsorship is not something that is in Canadian immigration law. It's a term that a lot of companies use because it's something that happens in the US, okay? In Canada, there's no such thing as sponsorship. The employers can help you. They have to, for example, the employer-based programs for OIMP, they have to sign a form and they have to tell the government that, yes, they have offered you a job, but that's not sponsorship. It's just they're supporting your application. They may need to do LMIA where they need to do certain things. So whenever I hear the term, oh, the employer doesn't want to sponsor me, that means that the employer actually doesn't really understand what needs to happen because they're using a term that it's not even in Canadian law. Okay. When we talk with employers, it's very important that oftentimes with these kind of applications, with OIMPs, LMIAs, these are employer-based programs, and they need to be the ones who are signing the form. So they need to be very clear on what their obligations are and what they need to do. For example, sometimes we have and we work with a lot of employers, and sometimes the employers come to us and say, oh, you know what? One of our employees just told us, oh, we have to go and sign this form. They only have 14 days to submit the application. They got an invitation to apply through OIMP, and we don't want to sign it. We don't know what it is. Those are situations that you should not get yourself into. We have sometimes we have people who hire consultants who say, oh, just put it in, and then afterwards just, give the employer short notice to do it. And it's really bad to do that, because sometimes the employers, first of all, they don't know what's happening. 14 days. Once you get an invitation to apply for OIMP, you only have 14 days to submit your application. And it's oftentimes, that short period of time is too short for an employer to really understand what they need to do. And oftentimes, the employer does not want to tell you information about their income and, like how many people they have fully employed, etc. As lawyers, we can act as firewalls and buffers. We have their solicitor-client privilege. We are obliged to keep things secret, and we can act as a firewall between you and the employer. If the employer doesn't want you to know, we can submit your application and deal with the government, right? And so that often helps the employer in that respect, to proceed and go ahead. And sometimes the employers don't even qualify. To qualify for these programs, if they're in the GTA, they have to be in business for 3 years, have over a gross income of over $1 million, have at least 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. Sometimes employers don't qualify. And so usually the best practice is, before you even get into the pool for these kind of things, talk with the employer, make sure that they are agreeable and are on board to help you. And then you enter the pool as soon as you get the invitation to apply. Usually even before you get the invitation to apply, we're already working with the employer to gather the documents, and you can submit your application on time. All right, I think we are pretty much out of time today. Maria, are you there?
Amazing. Yeah, I'm here. All right, let's see. Okay, perfect. We have over 100 questions. That's quite a lot. So thank you very much for an amazing session, or I know, should I say merci? We have seen how important is French right now, so we really recommend you to start studying French if you want to get more possibilities and enhance your possibilities of applying for a PR. So you already have Lambton College LLP information, but right now you are seeing the QR code of the center. If you wish, you can follow us on Instagram account, and you will be able to see all the events the center will carry out this year. So once again, thank you very much, Elizabeth and Mary, for a clear and detailed exposition. It was amazing. We at the center, we understand very well how important it is, this immigration issue, for all of our students and graduates. So we're here to support you. In the upcoming days, you will receive a message from us, an email, because we want to conduct a survey, and I would really appreciate if you can kindly answer to it, because this is a way we can keep improving for you. So the survey will be mainly regarding the avenues for obtaining permanent residence, what to do if your application has been denied, and how French language proficiency can enhance immigration opportunities. So once again, thank you so much, Mary and Elizabeth, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm looking forward to seeing next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.